So, to honor the fact that I have done 25 of these 10-hour videos, which is still crazy to me, by the way, I'm going to be doing a tier list, because I've gotten several comments of which one was my favorite or the best to learn. It's not going to be based on power level, because buffs and nerfs can change that dramatically. It's mostly going to be how easy they are to learn, how fun they were to learn, and if I think they're really worth your time, so hopefully you enjoy. Garen's actually, I was going to put him in A tier, I'm going to put him in S tier. He's pretty fun, it's fun just spinning to win, and I think he gives you a lot of the fundamentals of the game, especially if you're a beginner or a beginner to top lane. He's just a solid champion overall. Next is Sion, I'm putting him in C tier. Mostly because he's a very unique, kind of weird champion. You need to know to proxy farm sometimes. Sometimes it's good to die on Sion. There are a couple of different builds you can go. You want to go full AD and split push. You want to go tank. I'm not saying he's bad. I just think there are better champions for you to learn. For example, Tryndamere. Gonna put him in B tier. I feel like he's basically just a simpler version of Sion. He is very straightforward. You build damage and crit. But yeah, you just build damage and you just sit in a lane and you split push. He is worse in team fights and stuff than Sion, though. If you want to learn split pushing, he's a great champion. Next is Malphite. I think Malphite is overall one of the, if not the best tank to learn for the top lane, because he's got decent early game. He's got a great ultimate, so even if you fall behind, you can always stay somewhat relevant for your team. The only problem, the reason why he's not in S tier, is because if you play against an AP top laner, it feels like garbage. Next we have Irelia. Irelia goes in A tier. Really fun to play, but again, and this is going to be kind of a theme with the more mechanically difficult champions, I don't want to put them in S tier because 10 hours just is not enough time to actually learn them. But again, super fun. Irelia can be a good duelist, split pusher, team fighter. I wanted to put her in S tier because of how fun she was, but I just couldn't. Next is Teemo. I wanted to put Teemo in F tier, but I'm actually going to put him in C tier because if you learn Teemo, he's just so weird and unique. He's not very mobile, AP top laner that does pretty good damage and has good zone control with his mushrooms, but can kind of mess up your team comp if you need a tank, and if you fall behind, it feels terrible on this champion. I just would not recommend Teemo. I think they're better ranged top laners. I think they're better AP top laners, but yeah, I think he's a C tier champion. Next is Singed, F tier. Very overwhelming. If you play Singed, you're basically playing a minigame. You're not playing League of Legends. You're just running around doing your own thing. He's not as good at split pushing as Sion. His team fighting's interesting because your ult gives you grievous wounds, and when you get rylized, you have this permanent slow, but he's just so weird and niche. Next we have Riven. I think Riven's gonna go at the bottom of A tier. I think it's very similar to like Irelia. Mechanically difficult to play, but very fun to learn. The problem with Riven is a lack of sustain, especially early game in lane, so if you make a mistake, it can be very punishing, and you also need to know how to do like a fast combo to really take advantage of your early game. Honestly, I think I'll put her top of B tier. She was kind of difficult and less fun than Irelia, in my opinion. Next is Heimerdinger. Again, F tier. I just didn't like Heimerdinger. It's like Singed, like the ability of Heimerdinger to pull off these 1v2s with your turrets. Like, not many other champions can do that, and if you learn to do that with just this champion, and you go on another champion, you're gonna overextend, you're gonna die to ganks, you're not gonna be playing very well, pretty much the whole time, in my opinion. I just don't like Heimerdinger. Next is Shaco. I personally hate this champion, but I'm gonna put him in A tier. I think he's a great jungler. Yeah, he's got really good ganks. Obviously, he can do things other junglers can't, so he's not the perfect jungler. I'm not gonna put him in S tier, but he's quite strong. He can build AP or AD depending on what your team needs. His ganks are pretty easy and solid because you can just go invisible and then drop a box. I think Shaco, even though I hate him, top 3 least favorite champion in the game, maybe the least favorite champion for me, he's a good champion. I honestly kind of enjoyed playing him, sadly. Kassadin is gonna go in the S tier, and people are gonna say like, oh, well, Malphite is bad against AP matchups, Kassadin's better against AD matchups. Let me tell you something. At least in my experience, as long as you're not playing in like Diamond, right, where like 80% of people are Platinum and below, they're not going to punish you for playing Kassadin. I've gotten in a debate with this with a couple of my friends that are like Gold and Plat and stuff. As long as you play safe, you will get level 11 with being minimally behind. Because if you're getting constantly pushed into tower, especially at lower ranks, people don't know how to punish you for that. They're not going to roam as much, and because of your ult, you're very mobile, so you can actually roam really well yourself once you hit level 6 or level 11. Just farm and play safe. Another S tier champion back to back is Ezreal. I think Ezreal is the best AD carry to learn because of how safe he is. Yes, you have to land skill shots with your Q, but you have to land skill shots with most champions, and you can still go a more crit auto attack build for Ezreal that does exist. Again, he's super safe. He's pretty easy to learn because it's not like you have to do a ton of crazy things on him. It's just more landing your Qs and getting used to skill shots. I had a great time playing Israel. He feels good. You can play aggressive in lane with poke with your Q and your passive attack speed to help push you the lane, or you can play safe and just play for the mid game once you get your like Trinity Force and Manamune or whatever. Next we have Leona. Leona's gonna go B tier. She's a fine support. I just don't really like her that much. I thought she was very boring. Next, we're going to place Diana, also in B tier. I think there are better junglers, and I think there are better mid laners. Don't get me wrong, Diana's fine, especially if you need like an AP jungler, but like if you're gonna go AP jungle, just go like Lilia or Echo, and same thing goes with mid lane. Like there are other better AP assassin-ish mid laners, like just off the top of my head, like Katarina or something. Next, we have Lux. A tier. She's boring, but she can be played support and mid, so it's kind of worth your time there. And you can play safe and very aggressively, and you feel strong at the early stages of the game. You got great burst late game. She's just a fine champion. I don't think she deserves to be S tier. I think she's a little bit better than B tier. I'm gonna put her at the bottom of A. Next we have Hui, another C tier champion. To be fair, I played this champion right when he came out, so there weren't any video guides when I started playing him. But because he has so many moves, he's very overwhelming, and there are other better mid laners I think you can learn to play. Next we have Kai'Sa, top of B tier. The only reason she's this low is because she's kind of hard mechanically, in my opinion. You're very close range and kind of a duelist, and you have a lot of different build options. And I mean a lot. You can go hybrid, AP, crit, you can go lethality and be more of an assassin, and you also sometimes have to build components to finish your evolutions before you actually finish items as a whole. There's just a lot to think about when it comes to the build path of Kai'Sa. Next we have Shen. I'm gonna put him, I guess, bottom of B tier. The only reason why I'm putting him this low is because even though he was cool, and I think he's a very good tank, he's very team reliant. So if you want to play somebody who can be a little bit more impactful, like Malphite with a big ultimate where you can actually like start the fights, right? You can actually get things going. Shen more has to play around his team, which can be really bad. Next we have Xerath. I think Xerath goes somewhere in the middle to top of B tier because I just think it's kind of like Lux, but a little bit harder in my opinion. Yeah, I don't know. Lux and Xerath are very similar. Honestly, I could put them right next to each other. I just think Xerath's a little bit worse than Lux personally. Next we have Jinx. I'm gonna put Jinx near the top of A tier. Maybe not the very top, but somewhere around here. Her early game is not as weak as I thought it was going to be. So you can actually push for level 2 early, shove your opponent under tower, let the wave push back into you, and then you can get a gank or something. The only issue is you have no mobility. But overall, she's now actually my go-to champion when I pick AD carry or I get autofilled AD carry. Next we have Maokai. I'm gonna put Maokai in the S tier. He can play top, he can play jungle, he can play support. His build path is relatively simple. You just build tank. He has an insane amount of lockdown with his W, his Q knockup, his ult, his E can set up vision and zone control to set up objectives. Just every single thing about this champion is good. Not even the fact that he's really strong right now, but just my goodness gracious, this champion is just he's good at everything. He can also do a decent amount of damage with some percent HP stuff. Next we have Ornn. I'm gonna put him above these two. No, I'll put him above Xerath, but below Lux. Just because he's a little bit harder to play than some of the other tank top laners. He's got great late game, good base damage, he's very tanky, but when it comes to like Maokai and Malphite, I just think that he's a little bit harder to execute well. Next we have Kindred. They are gonna be F tier. I don't think Kindred and Wolf, I don't think they're bad, right? The problem is they're just so unique. If you pick them in the jungle, your team comp's gonna suck most of the time unless you have a top laner or support that picked a very tanky champion. Your mark, that whole system is very difficult to pick up on. Even after 10 hours, I still had a sometimes difficult time reading where the next mark was gonna go. It can kind of telegraph where you're gonna go to the enemy team. It can also just like ruin a gank or ruin an invade completely. I think if you want to spend like 100 hours to learn them, you can do that. But for 10 hours, very difficult. Next is Yasuo. Dude, I have to put him in S tier because of all of the champions I learned to play, he was the most fun by a lot, actually. No, I'm not gonna be biased. I'm gonna put him top of A. He's super duper fun, but in 10 hours, you just cannot learn all of the mechanical things that you have to do on him. He's been recently nerfed 1 or 2 times, which stops some of the timing that you had on certain combos. He just feels clunkier to play after several nerfs. So he's super fun, but my goodness, I can't put him S tier. He's just too hard to learn and play. We have Draven. I'm gonna put him in A tier. his axes are very difficult and it can kind of mess you up in team fights, and you need to know when to catch them and when to not catch them. It can basically tell your opponent where you're gonna go, and they can shoot skill shots at where your axe is gonna land and do a lot of damage to you. So he's got a bit of a learning curve, but my goodness, nothing feels better than just killing your opponents over and over again, like levels 1 to 10 or whatever. No, you know what? He's not as good as Jinx. I would say he's worse than Jinx, but better than Kaisa in my opinion, and he deserves to be A tier. But yeah, overall, this is it. This is the first 25 champions that I've played. Some of these might be a bit biased, but that's kind of the nature of a tier list like this, my own personal experience with a lot of these champions to learn. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.